You may have heard of birth doulas and death doulas, but have you ever heard of a trauma doula? That's me. My name's Toni, and I'm the trauma doula, and this is your place to heal trauma, body and soul. What's the truth about trauma stuck in your body? You'll definitely want to tune in, especially if you had a rough childhood, because this could be the key towards finding and releasing the trauma that's been stored in your body for years. Now, to talk about trauma in your body, we have to talk about somatic memory. So first, we know what memory is, but let's just say memory are things, sensations. Memory can be visions, memory can be smells. It helps you remember, recall information from the past, recall information about things that happened, about people you've met, about, putting faces to names. That's usually what memory is about. Although some of us might have a harder time than others with our memory, that is what memory is about. It's about recalling information from the past, whether that be people's names, places you've lived in the past, the smell of the garden in spring. All those things are memory. But when we talk about trauma in your body, we're talking about something called somatic memory. Okay? Now, somatic means body. So somatic means body. So body memory, somatic memory. Now, how does that work? The best way that I can really put that out there is to talk about driving. If you drive, you know that a lot of times at this point, if you've driven more than a year or two, you don't really have to think about every single step it takes to drive. You're driving in your car, you get on the highway, you didn't have to think about putting your foot on the brakes when the cars in front of you started to slow down. Driving a car and riding a bike are forms of somatic memory. But let's take this a little step further. Let's say you ride your bike around a steep bend and you end up crashing. And something about that bend really pulled you in, and all of a sudden, you're riding your bike, you're rolling around that bend, and you're having a blast. Your energy is up. Your adrenaline is up, because adrenaline can be up even when you're excited, not just when you're scared. Right? So you're riding around that bend, the wind's in your hair, you're having fun, and then boom, you crash your bike, or a car runs you off the road or something. It happens a lot. And now every time you're on your bike and you're going around a bend, you start to feel anxious, sweaty, overwhelmed. This is how somatic memories become stored trauma in your body. Okay? So this thing happens, you're riding your bike, you crash, boom, every time you ride a bike now. Now, let's say something else happens when you're much, much, much younger. And instead of knowing when you're riding your bike, like, yeah, I'm anxious because I, had that bike wreck that happened. Let's say you never remember the bike wreck. The only thing you know is that every time you're going around a bend, every single time doesn't matter if you're in a car, doesn't matter if you're on a bike, every time you're taking this sharp, winding turn, this curve, you break out into sweat, you get anxious, you get overwhelmed, and you can't even attribute it fully to going around the bend. So you just think, now, I'm just afraid of riding bikes and driving my car, really. Now it's the whole car or the whole bike you're afraid of, because you can't remember that one instance, like what happened. And now you have this memory that's only a somatic memory and not a fully stored memory that you can bring up and recall the information from. Now let's take this a step further and say that you don't remember your childhood. You still have somatic memories playing out in your day-to-day life, whether you consciously remember them or not. And some of those somatic memories are pleasant. They're beautiful. There might be a love of a certain texture. Some people, I knew this one woman, she really loved the texture of like fuzzy blanket. And it was a particular kind of suede fuzzy blanket. And it just gave her really good warm feelings. And then later on, her mother told her about her blanket in childhood and how much she loved her blankie and went with it everywhere and just had this attachment to a blanket that was a similar texture as the ones she was talking about loving in her adulthood at like 40 plus years old. But some of those somatic memories are trauma memories. So they're body memories, somatic memories, okay, that are in your body that you may, especially if your childhood was rough, you may not consciously remember and be able to recall where that's coming from. You had a crash, but you don't remember the crash. You just know you're afraid of bikes. And this is what it's like, especially for those who have more complex trauma. So complex trauma or developmental trauma is trauma that takes place in early childhood and just your developmental years and is continuous, is prolonged, and doesn't really have a place where it ended. There's a lot of developmental milestones that people miss whenever they go through developmental trauma. And in adulthood, they may be looking for people and relationships to either mimic their relationships from childhood so they can begin to work some of that stuff out. You know, that's why a lot of survivors get into really toxic romantic relationships, actually. It's a way to try and get into a place where you can mimic the themes in that early childhood so that you can work out some of those developmental milestones that you didn't get to work out. So you end up in something that mimics that past, or you end up in something that is completely opposite of it. You run so far away from it, and yet somehow you still end up in the same type of energy. It's definitely a thing. So that's something to think about. If that resonates with you, definitely pay attention to that, because that lets me know that you're in a place of at least being able to recognize, hey, this kind of feels like my relationship with my mother in childhood or my brother, or, you know, pay attention to those things. They can shed a lot of light on the places where you need healing, and it can start to open up more of what we're about to call echoes, right? So when you are a survivor of childhood trauma, and again, you do not remember all the things that happened, and used to have these somatic memories. So your body responds, and you might feel anxious or worried or scared or angry at things that on their surface, maybe you should be angry about, maybe you shouldn't, but the response to the input that you're receiving from other people doesn't quite match. Like, you shouldn't be that angry that your partner didn't do the dishes today, you know, that type of thing. So while you may not consciously remember what happened, there's a place within you that always knows. It always knows what happened to you. It's a timekeeper, actually. And this is a place I like to call an echo. And an echo is the you that remembers when the rest of you forget. Your echo's job is to keep speaking its truth until you come back to hear it. An echo is the you that remembers when the rest of you forgets. It's safe to forget. That's why we don't remember sometimes, because it is safer to forget. It's safer to not remember. It's safer to disassociate and not have to feel the full brunt of what happened to you. But it is your echo's job to keep speaking its truth, because the echo is you, and it's waiting for you to come back and hear your own truth. from the part of you, from the echo that has had to hold what happened. Because that echo is not only holding what happened to you, that echo is holding the pain, it's holding the fear, it's holding the somatic memory. That's the beautiful thing about echoes. We can begin to heal ourselves by coming back to the place in ourselves that's holding our own truth. In the case of repeated traumatic experiences, again, this is what people call like CPTSD, complex trauma, developmental trauma. This is, unresolved trauma where you do not have community support, you don't have professional support, you don't have friendship support, you don't have any type of support that comes in and says, hey, this bad thing happened, but it doesn't have to happen anymore. It's the bad thing happened and it's going to keep happening and no one's coming to save you. Right? And that pulls in a lot of helplessness, a lot of hopelessness. Don't worry, because that is not the end. Remember, your echoes are the places where it's speaking the truth until you come back, until you're able to hear it. Because sometimes you're not ready yet, and that's okay. That's why the echo's there. That's why it's holding it. Because maybe you're not quite ready, but it's not gonna not be there. It's there until you're ready. This is why somatic memory is a beautiful and important part of healing trauma. Because again, it's not gonna not be there. It's not gonna just go away. But it also isn't going to force you to be in a place where you're able to receive its truth. It's going to allow you to be in a place where you're safe and ready. And that's a part of trauma recovery as a whole, is getting to a place where you can be ready to receive the truth of your own echo. But again, what happens in the case of CPTSD? What happens in the case of developmental trauma where there's this continuing thing? Many echoes are created. So what does that mean? Maybe there's an echo in the right side of your scapula, in between your shoulder blades. Maybe there's an echo on your left hip flexor. Maybe there's an echo on your right ankle. Maybe there's an echo in your lower back. Maybe there's an echo on your chest, on your heart. If you remember the chakra series, echoes can be stored in those spaces, in those energy centers. And so pulling together not only what the echo is saying, but how it's speaking to you. Is it that pain in your neck or that pain in your butt? Again, when there's multiple echoes, there are multiple places where they exist. And so what happens when there's multiple echoes, imagine you're in a cave, okay? Imagine your body, you're in a cave and you're hearing different people calling out to you from different directions, and then it's all echoing all over this cave. You're not going to know which direction to walk to. It's noisy, and you don't know which echo will lead you out. But it's the echo's job to show you where you're holding trauma in your body. Okay? And each and every echo holds a specific supportive place for your personal healing. Remember, your echo, again, it's your truth, and it is there to show you your truth, to tell you what happened, to tell you how you felt. And it's just holding on to all that information. So if you feel heavy in your body, if you feel like, just achy and heavy and this and that, you got a lot of things echoing inside of you. It's your job to learn how to release the trauma in your body and work with your echoes. Ultimately, the echoes and somatic memories are all you calling out to you to receive what you need to heal. If you want help with this and learning how to find your echoes, find the places in your body where the patterns and movements and energy is stuck, and learn how to release that trauma and work with your echoes, visit my website at www.thetraumadoula.com. for ways to work with me and sign up for my newsletter, which is in the description box below, which will have lots of somatic movement therapies and yoga therapies to support you on your healing journey.